I was caught off guard when Asuna told me the commander wanted a one-on-one meeting with me. "A what?" I asked, confused. Was this like some kind of duel? How did things take such a weird turn? I turned to Asuna and asked her what was going on. She shook her head and looked down. "I don't know," she said quietly. I tried to tell him it wasn't necessary, but he wouldn't listen. This was strange. The commander wasn't usually the type to make demands like this. Normally he let us handle things our way. He trusted us to make good decisions about the guild and our strategy for beating the game. But now it seemed like he was making an exception. The commander was a really respected guy. Not just in our guild, but among all the top players trying to clear the game. He had a way of inspiring people and getting them excited about what we were doing. But even though he was a great leader, he rarely gave orders or told us what to do. So why was he being so insistent on this one-on-one meeting? I'd fought alongside him before, and he was always quiet and supportive, so it was super weird when he suddenly spoke up against me and challenged me to a duel. I was confused, but I wanted to make Asuna feel better. "Don't worry, I'll head to Granzim and try to figure out what's going on," I said. Asuna apologized for causing trouble, and I could tell she felt bad. I wanted to reassure her, so I tried to come up with the right words. "You're really important to me, because you're an amazing ally in our quest to beat the game," I said. At first, Asuna looked a little disappointed, but then she smiled. It was a relief. And by the way, this guy who had just challenged me was known as the strongest player in Aincrad. Not exactly someone you'd want to mess with. Meet Heathcliff, the ultimate gaming hero. He's known by many names: the living legend, the paladin, and the leader of the famous Knights of the Blood. This guy was a total rock star in the gaming world. Before I became famous for my dual blades, Heathcliff was the only one out of 6,000 players who had a unique skill. His superpower was called Holy Sword, which made him a master of both attacking and defending. He even wore a cool sword and shield that looked like a cross. I've seen Heathcliff in action, and let me tell you, it's amazing. What really blew my mind was his defense skills. People say that no one has ever seen his health bar drop to the warning zone. It's like he's invincible. Imagine being in the middle of a crazy battle on the 50th floor of a massive virtual world called Aincrad. The boss was super tough, but one player, Heathcliff, took control of the front line all by himself for 10 whole minutes. It was legendary. Everyone knew that no sword could break through his powerful shield. Now I was standing on the 55th floor with my friend Asuna, and I was getting really nervous. We were in a city called Granzim, also known as the City of Iron. It was different from other towns in Aincrad, because it was made of shiny steel instead of stone. The city was filled with tall pointy towers that sparkled like metal. I didn't plan on fighting Heathcliff though. That would be crazy. I just wanted to ask him a favor. Asuna is part of Heathcliff's guild, and I hoped he would let her take a break from the group for a little while. I took a deep breath and prepared to talk to him, hoping he would say yes. Imagine a town packed with blacksmiths hammering away at hot metal and engravers carefully carving designs into steel. The streets of Granzim were bustling with people, but you wouldn't find a single tree or blade of grass anywhere. When autumn rolled around, the winds howled through the town, making it feel freezing, and it wasn't just the cold air that made you shiver. As we stepped through the teleport gate, we walked onto a main street made entirely of shiny steel plates. The ground beneath our feet was slick and smooth. Asuna trudged along beside me, her pace slow and worried. She was nervous about what was coming next. We wandered through the town's tower-filled streets for about 10 minutes before one massive tower came into view. It dwarfed all the others. Above the huge front door, sharp silver spears pointed towards the sky, and a flag with a red cross on a white background flapped wildly in the chilly breeze. Asuna stopped in front of a huge building, the headquarters of the Knights of the Blood. She gazed up at the tall tower and smiled. "Remember our old base?" she asked. It was a tiny house on the 39th floor. We always complained about how small it was. Asuna chuckled. "I'm not saying it's bad that we've come so far. But I really don't like this town, it's freezing." I agreed with her. "Let's get what we need to do over with and find some hot food," I said. Asuna teased me as eating all you ever think about. She laughed and playfully squeezed my fingers. For a few seconds, she held my hand, then let go and said, all energized. Asuna started walking towards the tower, and I had to hurry to catch up. We climbed a big staircase to a large doorway. On either side of the door stood soldiers in heavy armor, holding super long spears that looked really scary. As Asuna's boots clicked closer, my friends and I stood up straight, raised our weapons and saluted with a loud clang. "Keep it up," she said with a smile. She saluted back with one hand, her pace quick and confident. It was hard to believe this was the same person who had been feeling down just an hour ago in Agile's shop. I rushed to catch up with Asuna as we passed the guards and entered the tower. The first floor was made of the same dark metal as the rest of the city, and it felt like a huge staircase. But something felt off. The room was empty and eerily quiet. I walked across the floor, which was covered in a cool mosaic made from different types of metal. The building seemed even chillier than the rest of the town, and it gave me the shivers. We began our adventure in the lobby, where a super cool spiral staircase caught my eye. It was located all the way at the far end of the room. As we climbed the stairs, our footsteps clanged loudly and echoed off the walls. The tower was seriously tall, and I could see why someone who wasn't very strong might get tired and give up halfway up. We walked past lots of doors, and I started to wonder how much farther we had to go. Just when I thought we'd never reach the top, Asuna stopped in front of a plain metal door. "Is this it?" I asked her. She nodded, but she looked a bit nervous. Asuna took a deep breath, knocked on the door with a loud tap-tap, and then pushed it open without waiting for anyone to say come in. When she did, a blast of bright light poured out, and I had to squint my eyes. As my eyes adjusted, I saw that we were in a huge circular room that took up the entire floor of the tower. It was amazing. Imagine walking into a room where everything is made of glass, the walls, the whole thing. The light coming in is gray and dull, making the entire space feel kind of boring. But then you look around and see a big curvy desk in the middle of the room. 5 guys are sitting in chairs around it, and one of them catches your eye. He's the guy in the middle, Heathcliff. The paladin. You can't miss him. Heathcliff doesn't look like a tough guy or anything. He seems pretty normal actually. He looks like he's in his 20s, and he has a kind of book-smart face. His forehead is really high, and his grayish hair falls across it in bangs. There's something pointy about his face, like it was carved that way on purpose. But even though he doesn't look super strong or anything, there's just something about him. Imagine a guy who's super tall and skinny dressed in a bright red robe. He looks more like a magician than a skilled swordsman. But what really catches your attention are his eyes. They're this weird brass color that seems to pull you in, like a magnet. I'd met him before, but he still made me feel nervous. Like it was our first time meeting. Just then, Asuna walked up to the table, her boots making loud clicks on the floor. She gave a quick bow and said, "I'm here to say goodbye." But Heathcliff just smiled in a way that said he didn't believe her. "Don't be so sure about that," he said. "Let me talk to him first." Then he turned his intense gaze on me. Those brass-colored eyes seemed to bore into my skin, making me feel even more uneasy. I pulled back my hood and walked up to Asuna. "We haven't really talked outside of fighting bosses, have we, Kirito?" I said with a smile. Asuna thought for a moment before responding. "Actually, we did chat a bit during the meeting to plan our attack on the 67th floor. Just then, Heathcliff nodded slightly, and clasped his hands together on the table. "That was one tough battle," he said. "We almost lost some great players. People think we're the best guild, but it's getting harder and harder to keep up. And now you want to take away one of our key members." I shot back. "If she's that important, you should choose her bodyguards more carefully." The big guy sitting on the right jumped out of his seat, his face turning red with anger. Heathcliff raised his hand, and his calm voice stopped me in my tracks.
"Kuradel is in big trouble for what he did," he said. "But we can't just let our vice commander walk away without saying something." Kuradel, he gave me a piercing stare, his metallic eyes gleaming with intensity. I could feel the strength of his will behind that gaze. "If you want to take Asuna with you, you'll have to fight me for her," Heathcliff declared. "Use your dual blades and let's see what you're made of. If you win, she's all yours. But if you lose, you'll have to join the Knights of the Blood." I was taken aback, but as I looked at Heathcliff, I started to get it. This guy loved a good fight. And he was always up for a challenge. He was like a magnet, drawn to the thrill of battle.
Here's the rewritten text. He was super confident in his skills. Even when trapped in this crazy game where you could die for real, he just couldn't shake off his gaming ego. And honestly, I get it. Asuna had been quietly listening to Heathcliff, but she finally spoke up. "Commander, I'm not quitting the guild," she said. "I just need some time to think about what's going on." I put a hand on her shoulder as she tried to make her point, and then I stepped forward. I looked straight at Heathcliff, and somehow found myself saying, "You know what, I accept your challenge. Let's settle this with a duel, just me and my sword." Asuna was furious. "You idiot," she shouted. "What are you doing?" Before we knew it, we were back in Agile's store in Algade, upstairs and away from the chaos. I had just kicked the owner back down the stairs because he tried to sneak a peek. Now I was trying to calm down Asuna, who was super upset with me. "Why did you say that?" she asked, her voice shaking with anger. She was sitting on the arm of my rocking chair, punching me with her small fists. "I'm sorry, okay. I just couldn't help it," I said. I gently grabbed her wrists to stop her from hitting me. Instead of punching, Asuna puffed out her cheeks like a blowfish. It was hard not to laugh. This wasn't the same serious Asuna I knew from our adventures together at the guild. "It's okay, don't worry about it," I said, trying to reassure her. Here's the rewritten text. "Don't worry, we'll be fine. We're playing with a one-hit win rule," I said. Asuna let out a frustrated groan and crossed her legs, still sitting on the armrest. "I've seen you fight with your dual blades before," she said. "You're super powerful, but the commander's holy sword ability is crazy strong too. It's like he's unbeatable. Honestly, I have no idea who will win." Asuna looked worried. "What if you lose? Not only will I be stuck without a break, but you'll have to join the Kopub. That would be a disaster." I just shrugged. "Maybe that wouldn't be so bad," I said with a grin. Asuna's eyes widened in surprise. "Huh? What do you mean?" Here's the rewritten text. I took a deep breath and said what was really on my mind. "As long as I'm with you, that's all I need. It was crazy, but just a little while ago you couldn't have gotten me to say those words even if you'd turned me upside down." Asuna's eyes went super wide and her face turned bright red in like 2 seconds. She looked so surprised. The room got quiet for a moment. And then Asuna got up from her chair and walked over to the window. Outside, the city of Algade was buzzing with people going about their evening routines. I had just told Asuna the truth, but it didn't change how I felt about joining a guild. I still wasn't interested. Thinking about my old guild, the one that doesn't exist anymore, made my heart hurt. It felt like someone had stabbed me with a sharp pain. But I wasn't gonna let those bad memories get me down. I told myself I'm not giving up that easily. I walked over to the window and stood beside Asuna. After a bit, she leaned her head against my shoulder. We gazed out at the crazy busy town on the 75th floor. The sign said it was called Kalinia, and it looked just like an ancient Roman city. There were warriors, traders, and tourists everywhere, all excited to explore this new place. But today was special. A big event was happening, and the town was buzzing with energy from sunrise onward. As we looked out, I saw that the buildings were made of huge white stone blocks. The town had canals and temple-like structures that were really cool. But one thing stood out above everything else: an enormous Colosseum that towered over the teleport gate square. It was an amazing sight. What a crazy coincidence. The Colosseum was the perfect spot for my duel with Heathcliff. But as we walked in, it was total chaos. Vendors were yelling about their weird food. Fire-breathing corn, just 10 coal, and get your cold black ale here. People were lined up everywhere, waiting to get in. I turned to Asuna, totally confused. "What's going on here?" I asked. She just shook her head. "I have no idea." Then I spotted some guys from the Knights of the Blood selling tickets. "Hey, are those cold members over there? How did this turn into such a big deal?" Asuna just shrugged again. "I don't know." I started to get suspicious. This wasn't part of Heathcliff's plan, was it? Asuna thought for a moment. "I think Daisen might be behind all this. Those accountants really know how to make things happen." She laughed, but I just felt frustrated. My shoulders slumped in defeat. "Let's just forget it, and leave." "Asuna," I said. But I had a feeling it was too late for that. "Let's find a quiet village somewhere and work on some farms," I said. She looked at me with a straight face and replied, "I wouldn't mind taking it easy. But if you run away from all this, everyone will be talking about you." I muttered under my breath, "This is not good." She just shrugged and said, "You got yourself into this mess. Now you have to deal with it." Just then, a loud voice boomed out. "Oh, Daisen. A really big guy with a huge belly was walking towards us. He was wearing the red and white uniform of the Kobe, but it didn't look very good on him. He had a huge smile on his face, and was waving at us. Thanks so much, he exclaimed, looking pretty happy to see us. Here's the rewritten text. Thanks to you, Kirito. Our business is booming, someone exclaimed. The only way it could get better is if we did this every month. I just rolled my eyes and said, not a chance. The guy chuckled and said, hey, follow me. The changing room is just through here. I trudged along behind him, feeling pretty down. My mood was getting worse by the minute. The changing room was a small space near the arena. The guy Daisen showed me to the door, and then took off, saying something about adjusting the odds. I didn't even bother to respond. As we stood there, I could hear the roar of the crowd from inside the stadium. It sounded like it was packed. When we were alone, my friend, Asuna, grabbed my wrist and looked me straight in the eye. Remember, Kirito, she said seriously, even if you're only going to fight once, you still need to be careful. If your opponent lands a critical hit during a heavy attack, it could be game over. Hey, don't worry about me, I said with a grin, patting her on the shoulder. You should be worried about Heathcliff instead. My sword skills are still a bit of a mystery, even to myself. If things get too crazy out there, just quit and walk away. And let me remind you, if you push me too hard like last time, I'm not gonna forget it. Just then, a loud voice boomed over the crowd's cheers, announcing that our match was about to start. I gave my swords a little tease, pulling them out of their holders on my back just a bit before sliding them back in with a cool ching sound. The bright light of the arena was calling my name, and I was ready to go. As I stepped out into the arena, I saw that it was surrounded by rows and rows of packed stands. The crowd was cheering, and the energy was electric. It was time to get started. The crowd was huge. I'm talking at least 1,000 people packed into the Coliseum. I spotted Agile and Klein right up front, yelling crazy stuff like cut him down, and kill him. They were totally worked up. I made my way to the center of the arena, and stopped. That's when things got really loud. A figure in red appeared from the other side of the waiting room. The crowd went wild. But this wasn't just anyone, it was Heathcliff. And he looked different from usual. Instead of his normal red and white outfit, he was wearing a bright crimson coat. Like me, he didn't have a lot of armor on, but you couldn't miss the gigantic white cross shield on his left hand. It was pretty hard to ignore. Here's the rewritten text. As Heathcliff approached, I noticed his sword was hidden behind his shield, the handle stuck out over the top, and he walked up like it was no big deal. He stopped for a second to check out the crowd, then gave me an awkward smile. Hey Kirito, sorry about all this, he said. I didn't think it would turn into such a huge event. I joked, maybe I should get paid just for showing up. But Heathcliff wasn't laughing. No way after this duel. You're joining our guild. This is just a normal mission. His smile disappeared, and those piercing yellow-brown eyes of his locked onto mine. They were so intense that I took a step back. Even though we were just lying in beds in the real world, connected by computer screens, I could feel a powerful energy coming from him. Like he really wanted to win. It was like our virtual fight was real. My brain kicked into high gear, and I went into battle mode, ready for whatever was about to happen. The crowd's cheers faded into the background, as I locked eyes with Heathcliff. It was like everything around me started to blur, and my mind went into overdrive. Heathcliff looked away, took a few steps back, and held up his hand. A game screen popped up in front of him, but he didn't even glance at it. He just tapped away, and suddenly a duel challenge appeared in front of me. I accepted without hesitation. The goal was simple: be the first to strike. The countdown began, and the crowd's roar turned into a quiet hum. My heart started racing, and my body tingled with excitement. I tightened my grip on my instincts, trying not to let my nerves get the best of me. For a moment I felt a tiny spark of doubt, but I pushed it aside, and got ready to face whatever was coming next. I reached back and grabbed both of my swords at the same time. I knew I had to give it my all against this opponent. Heathcliff pulled out a long thin sword from behind his shield, and pointed it at me. He looked totally comfortable, like he was born to hold that shield and sword. I couldn't help but think that trying to guess what he'd do first would just confuse me, so I got ready to attack with all my might. We didn't even bother looking at the countdown timer. But as soon as the word duel appeared in the air, we both jumped into action at the same time. I darted forward, staying low to the ground, and moving quickly. My feet barely touched the earth as I glided towards Heathcliff. The duel was on. I swung into action as I faced off against Heathcliff. With a swift twist, I struck down and to the left with my right sword. But Heathcliff was ready. His cross shield blocked the attack, sending sparks flying everywhere. That wasn't my only move though. In a flash, my left blade swooped in from the side, trying to catch him off guard. This was my special double circular attack, where I use both swords to strike in a powerful circle. Just as my second sword was about to hit Heathcliff's side, he quickly raised his own sword to meet it. The two blades clashed, and a cool circular effect bounced off, but didn't do any damage. Heathcliff had blocked my attack, but this was just the beginning. The force of my swing helped me stay at a safe distance, giving me time to regroup and plan my next move. Then it was Heathcliff's turn. He charged towards me with his shield leading the way. Here's the rewritten text. I couldn't see what Heathcliff's right hand was up to behind that huge shield. CX. I muttered, quickly dashing to the side to get out of the way. My plan was to circle around the shield, hoping it would be easier to avoid his attack, even if I didn't see where it was coming from. But Heathcliff had other ideas. He lifted his shield up horizontally, and grunted loudly as he thrust the pointed end straight at me. The giant cross-shaped shield came flying towards me, leaving a trail of white light behind it. Whoa! I exclaimed, crossing my two swords in front of me just in time to block the hit. The impact was massive. A shockwave rippled through my body, and I stumbled backward several feet. It was a close call, but I managed to defend myself. For now. Whoa, things just got crazy. I slammed my right sword into the ground to stop myself from falling over. Did a quick flip in midair and managed to land on my feet. But here's the thing, the game thought my opponent's shield was actually a weapon that could attack me. It was like he was fighting with two swords at once. I thought having two chances to strike would give me an edge in this one-hit battle. But this was a total surprise. Just as I was trying to wrap my head around it, Heathcliff came charging towards me, trying to catch me off guard. His long sword was a blur of speed, almost as fast as the legendary Asuna the Flash. Now that he was on a roll with his combo attack, I had to use every trick in the book to block him with both my swords. It was intense. Here's the rewritten text. Asuna had filled me in on everything she knew about Heathcliff's powerful holy sword skill. But let's be real, hearing about something is way different from actually experiencing it. Luckily, my quick reflexes saved me from his crazy fast attacks. As soon as I blocked his last swing with my left sword, I launched a super strong Vorpal strike attack with my right. Ora! I shouted, as my glowing red sword slammed into the shield's cross-shaped center. It was like hitting a solid brick wall. It didn't budge. But I didn't give up. The impact was massive. And suddenly Heathcliff was flying backward.